The grams per mile for each vehicle above assumes that only one person is riding in the vehicle. Public transit uses larger vehicles and shares the footprint among more passengers. One study reported that riding the bus creates about 155 grams of CO2 per mile for a single passenger. And the thing that is neat about this figure is that we can compare that to the CO2 emissions from a car. So my CO2 emissions for my car were 322 grams per mile. So if I can use the bus sometimes, I can cut that in half. And LCC students do have access to a free bus pass as students if you're paying for the transportation fee. And that's a pretty good deal if you're traveling anywhere that the bus line serves. 155 grams per mile is comparable to Nayla's carbon footprint driving a Prius as well. So it is helpful to be able to compare between different modes of travel to determine what the CO2 emissions are. If we look at flying, there's a lot to figure in. Shorter flights are more carbon intensive because takeoff and landing use more fuel. If you want to reduce your carbon footprint, you should choose travel with longer and fewer flights. It's kind of like stop and go traffic is bad for your fuel efficiency compared to cruising on the highway. And so the planes have that same principle. One source states that a typical flight has the same carbon footprint as all of the passengers driving the same distance separately in a 30 mile per gallon car. So planes are definitely a lot faster and more convenient, but they use a tremendous amount of fuel to get that plane off the ground. We're going to use 290 grams per mile for air travel. And I'll show you how to calculate this. Let's say we're flying from Portland to New York City, which is about 2,900 miles each way. Find the carbon footprint of flying round trip. So here is your miles for the whole trip. We start with that because that's the personal information. 290 grams per mile is the carbon footprint for air travel. And then we want to have a metric tons answer, so we add this last fact, or we multiply by 1 metric ton over 1,000,000 grams. When I work this out, 5,800 times 290 divided by 1,000,000 gives me 1.682 metric tons. So that is the carbon footprint of flying to New York City and back. At least that's what we're calculating. The next thing I want to do is take you to this website and have this website calculate the carbon footprint for us. So I provided the link for you for this carbon calculator. And I'd like us to go to the Flights tab and then select PDX for Portland to JFK in New York City and select round trip or return trip. Leave the box checked for include radiative forcing and see what carbon footprint this calculates. And I get 1.11 metric tons of CO2, and that E, I believe, is equivalent. Not all of the emissions are carbon dioxide, but it turns out to be about 1.11 metric tons of the equivalent of CO2. So probably more science than I can even understand at this point.